Welcome to Mine Explorers, episode 16. Back in our studio. Been out for an episode or two. It's good to be back.
Yeah, the last interview was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Learn about what lobbyists actually do, and apparently it's a lot more than I thought.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the amount of topics that they cover and have to be educated on, so they can then educate the legislature so they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of goes back to when we were talking to David Reardon about micro-credentials. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen that episode, our last episode, episode 15, we interviewed a real lobbyist and also covered some mining issues.
We did.
And kind of all loops together. And it's interesting. I mean, you pick up a lot. It's like even just doing the show, we learn a lot about a lot of little things. You know, we talk about talent, and we talk about lobbying, and we talk about law. We talk about all the different things that are going on. And in next week's episode, we are talking about the wild world of investing in mining.
Yeah, the financial world of mining.
The financial, more the investing world. Because the financial world, you think about like the capital raising side and budgeting and planning stuff. This is from the perspective of retail investors into mining,
Right.
which is interesting.
Yep.
Because it's covered a lot on different shows, but it's always got some sort of spin, like advice or like invest in this company, that company. And I just want to talk about how it all works in general and maybe talk about some big macro trends. So,
You'll find no advice here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't really have an agenda other than education, which is nice.
Yeah.
And so it gives, the show does give a platform for companies to talk about the cool things they're doing, but like they don't pay to be on the show. They're not paid to promote anything. So it really is just, whatever it is, it's education. And if we ever have somebody on the show who's just overly promotional, we'll have to nudge them like, no, it's education.
I don't think that'll be an issue.
No.
Well, let's go back to the Fast 41 because we just learned that there are 10 new mines that came online.
Yep, on the Fast 41. Yep.
Which is really exciting. Now with this, is this the last of it? Do you know? Or are there going to be more?
No, there can be, I don't think there's a cap.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so they'll keep applying.
So real quick, we're not going to recap the other ones that were included. So this just came out.
That was a whole episode if you missed it.
Yeah, this just came out a couple days ago.
We're just going to go through the list and then maybe a little bit of commentary, but not too much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a copper and nickel mine in Minnesota from Glencore and Teck Resources. New Mexico has a uranium project from Energy Fuels.
Yep.
Montana palladium project from the Siboney Stillwater.
Siboney Stillwater.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Siboney Stillwater, my bad. Yes. Alaska has a silver project from Hecla. Georgia has a titanium dioxide project from Clemores.
Yep.
South 32, Hermosa zinc magnesium project in Arizona.
Yep, and Hermosa's been.
So this was fast tracked. It says this is from Reuters, by the way. This was fast tracked by President Biden, and it's the first one to receive the Fast 41 treatment.
Yeah, it's been fast tracked for a long time. Yeah, Hermosa for sure.
Okay, I don't think that's quite 10, but that's on the list here.
Yeah, I don't know if it was 10, but it's another big batch. So that first one, the name of that mine, because it's really important. That's a big one. It's not on your list.
How come it's not? It doesn't have the name of it. It just says Glencore and Teck Resources, a Minnesota mine.
Yeah, it's a big one.
They didn't give me the name.
It's a big important one. There's actually a couple up there.
PolyMet and Teck formed JV to develop Minnesota mining project.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. PolyMet, yeah.
PolyMet, yes. Yeah. That will be great for Minnesota.
Yeah, well, and that's one that I'm surprised wasn't on the first list. So, and I will pop up the name here in the middle of us or on the side of me, depending on how I do the camera angle, and a map of where it's at, because that's a really important one. The rest of them are also important, but that one I thought should have been on the first list.
Well, it's copper and nickel, which is two great commodities that we need and we use in so many different applications.
So biggest nickel mines in the world are in Canada and in Russia. And obviously the Russia ones isn't part of our friendly supply chain.
Right.
But now also potentially Canada isn't either. So it makes sense to have a domestic supply.
For sure. I mean, we should have a domestic supply for any commodity that we have here in the U.S. That just makes good sense.
Yep.
Domestic supply and refining.
Right.
Because that's the other component that we talked about in a previous episode that we're missing for some of these.
Right.
Because we're, like for rare earths is always a great example where we have 2 rare earth mines in the U.S., but there's one in Georgia, but we ship that out.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you call a rare earth mine. I feel like the only one is still Mountain Pass.
Yeah.
Because they are actually doing some processing.
They are doing some processing.
And they're the only ones that are doing more than one rare earth and they're doing some processing. Even though a lot of the concentrate is still going to China.
Right.
For finishing. I don't feel like there's any other rare earth mines in the U.S. that really fit that standard. But there are lots of potential projects that could.
Yeah.
And so, they're interesting, right? They're critical, they're small, they're important, but really, for me, I get excited about the copper projects on the list. The other stuff's cool, like, I like Energy Fuels, I like their projects. It's good to see them get more projects going. We're going to need more uranium. I read today that 70% of the power companies that consume uranium have not locked down any long-term supply contracts. So like looking out 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they don't have anything. And with all this uncertainty going on, uranium does have an exemption from the tariffs for Canada. So we can still get uranium from Canada. But U.S. production, we have 1 mill.
Right.
Here in Utah. So there's a lot that could happen there. Now, fortunately, in the 50s and beyond, we started up a uranium industry really quickly. And the technology to build the mills, conventional mills and stuff, it's not high tech, it's not complicated. So we know we can spin that industry up really quickly, but all the environmental hoops and everything to jump through, they're quite stringent, and for good reason with uranium.
Sure.
You need to make sure that stuff's all done safely. But we know we can spin it up, but we need to see some more stuff. So anyway, the fast track. Fast 41, we got the first 10, we got another batch. We'll just pop up a list so you can look at them real quick, because we didn't want to spend a whole episode on it again, because we did a whole episode with Fast 41 before. And then there's going to be more, and we'll mention them as they come through. But anybody who meets the criteria, the stated and the sort of unstated criteria, anybody who meets that criteria is going to be scrambling to get in on that. Yeah, for sure. If for any reason other than it just looks good for shareholders and stakeholders. Like, it's a cool designation, but theoretically it should also help. But as I saw in a lot of comments to our last episode about Fast 41, within the mining industry, there's a lot of skepticism about whether it's actually going to make a material difference or not.
Well, that's, I mean, we're a bit skeptical because a lot of those permitting relies still on the federal agencies to do their job. And what we're seeing, even just on a very small scale, that it's still slow. Yep. It's still slow. They're still backlogged on the BLM front. People either aren't doing their job or they're just understaffed. I'm not quite sure which, maybe a little bit of both. And so, sure, we can fast track all these mines all we want, but at the end of the day, we're still relying on the federal government to do their job. So if they're not funded or staffed or whatever the case may be, we're in the same spot as we were before.
Yeah, so one of the examples that was brought up in the comments on our last episode and further discussions on LinkedIn was Hermosa. Biden already designated it as basically a Fast 41 project.
And it's still on the list.
Now it's redesignated, and several years have gone by now and it hasn't really moved. But that was an administration that did a lot of things on one hand and then did a lot of things to block it on the other hand.
Yeah.
Not to say the current administration isn't convoluted and definitely in its own way, especially like you were talking about with the federal stuff. On one hand, hey, government, you need to fast track all this stuff. And then on the other hand, you're giving everyone buyout offers and you're taking your senior people who are good at their jobs.
The ones who are educated know what's going on and
you're
not
buying them out. So
Yeah.
like in the case of, going back several episodes to when we talked about land law examiners, like half of them are gone now.
Yep.
And they did not train replacements, and there's no books and there's no guides. It's all tribal knowledge and it's gone.
Well, there are guides, but it's still up to interpretation, and that's where it's really tricky.
So is an industry just cottage industry of staking claims and acquiring mineral rights? We adjust our practices to the interpretation of the land law examiners. Mm-hmm. And then if new one comes in and they're not trained by the old ones and they interpret things differently, it messes everything up.
I know.
Because at the end of the day, the land law examiner has a lot of leeway in how they interpret things.
Well, they have final say.
If you have a staff of mining attorneys, you can appeal and fight, but at what cost and at what
who
delays?
has time for that?
So going back, that was a big tangent, but going back,
We could go on that tangent all day long.
the Biden administration fast-tracked Hermosa. Not much happened. Now a bunch of stuff's getting fast-tracked, so we'll see if it actually goes, and hopefully that'll flesh out some of the skepticism. Mm-hmm. But assuming things move forward and we get some mines in production and get some cash flow in the industry, there's going to be a flood of investment.
Oh,
and we'll talk about that more in our next episode because
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
That'd be amazing.
But so that's kind of our update, because last time we talked with Dave, we didn't talk about mining news and update, and so this was a quick update. So let's shift gears and talk about mining history.
Okay.
We've got really technical in the mining industry with a lot of stuff, and I know our audience is broader than that. So let's talk about mining history. What's your favorite mining district in Utah?
The Tintics.
The Tintics.
Yeah.
People would better know that as
Eureka, Utah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Eureka, Nevada, Eureka, California. There's a Eureka in every state.
Yep. And almost always a mining town.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you go, Eureka!
Right.
So the exciting thing about Eureka is it was the second largest mining district in the state.
Still is.
Still is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bingham Canyon's 1, the Tintics are 2,
And then
Park City was 3. And Park City will never be mined again.
The Tintics they still have potential, which is
The Tintics
really
have
exciting.
big potential and will be mined again at some point, and are being mined on and off now.
Yeah.
Cisco Development has a gold mine there, high-grade gold mine.
Yep.
And Ivanhoe Electric is not mining, but they're doing some pretty serious exploration on the other side of the Tintics.
And let's not forget about the clay deposit out there.
The Halloysite clay.
Halloysite clay.
Yeah, so that's being mined on and off, and has potential as a
Battery
mineral. And we know the CEO of that company. We should have him on our show sometime.
We should. I mean, it's really interesting. They're developing their own technology for the batteries.
Well, we should have Andre on, and he could talk about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or their mine manager, Preston, he'd love to sit
go
down.
to a tour. That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a manufacturing facility.
They do.
So back to the history. What do you like about it?
Well, Eureka is an interesting place because it started as like any old prospecting town. Just, one prospector went out and found, the bonanza, and then, everyone flocked. But they had what I like about Eureka is it was divided into different districts where you had the dry town and then you had the saloon town.
Oh, with Jesse Knight.
Jesse Knight, yeah.
Knightsville. Yep.
Yeah, so I found a book at the office today called Yesterday's Dreams, Tomorrow's Memories. And it's a brief history of Eureka from 1909. And so it's has quite a bit of photos of what Eureka used to look like. And I'll post the link here so you can find the book yourself. But it's I love seeing like the old photos of like, because you look at Eureka, Utah now, and, you know, there's a few people who live there. There's a few old buildings, but then you forget that, like, this used to be, like, one of the busiest towns in the state. Like, there were railroads coming in. You know, they were moving. I think in one page here, they were talking about how many shipments of ore they were moving in a day. You know, like, thousands of cars of ore moving to California or up to Salt Lake to be smelted. And it's like, that is just so wild to think about how much activity was going on in that town in the 1800s and 1900s.
Yeah, and Eureka, if it had stayed in production at the scale it was with all those mines, would probably not match Bingham Canyon, because Bingham Canyon shifted to a big open pit really early, with the earliest mine in the world to actually go to open pit copper mining. So Eureka wouldn't have quite kept up, but still would have produced billions of dollars and did produce hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold, silver, lead, copper, zinc, but mostly gold and silver. And, you know, there's still a lot of potential out there. Pretty interesting place.
It is an interesting
But cool
place.
history. It's one of the first places I ever explored abandoned mines.
Yeah.
Centennial Eureka was one of the first mines I ever went in
Yeah.
when I was just a lad.
Yeah, and that you probably still had the head frame standing up when
The
you.
head frame was still standing.
Yeah.
I hiked all the way up to it.
Yeah, yeah.
That
I
was still
remember
there.
somebody was telling me that they shipped those head frames, the big beams for the head frames, in from Norway.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, because those beams, I mean, they're it's not even this big. It's like
Yeah, they're massive. Yeah.
I don't even think I'm big enough to show how big they are.
Yeah. Yeah, they're massive.
You might
and-
have a large enough wingspan to.
Yeah,
show the
and
width.
it's a shame there's not more of those head frames still standing out there.
Yeah.
There's the bullion beck, which you can see, and it's been restored once, and they're getting ready to do more restoration on it. Then almost all the other head frames have fallen in. They're all
Slowly falling
in
in.
the shaft or down below. Yeah, but the Centennial Eureka head frame was definitely standing then.
Yeah. We'll have to do another episode where we do a tour of some of the big mines out in Eureka.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
See if we can get Mayor Nick to take us out.
I don't think he's the
Do a
mayor
tour.
anymore, but we can
He
still.
hasn't been, but I think you still get the title.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's like being a judge or something. Like,
He can be mayor for life.
once you're mayor, I think people still call you mayor, even
Good.
though you're not the mayor. I think that's how it works. Kind of an honorary thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My favorite mining town is Ophir, Utah. And we have a lot of videos, a lot of photos, and a lot of projects we've done in Ophir. But I wanted to tell a story that's one of my favorite stories from there. So in Ophir wasn't a huge producer like the Tintics, but it was a solid producer. And Ophir ran from 1872 until the early 1970s. And not contiguously. There were periods of stopping and starting. But the mines were, like a lot of districts, scattered. So there were little mines here and there. There's the Buffalo and the Buckhorn, and then Hidden Treasure on the other side that's technically in a town called Jacob City. And then there's the Ophir Hill and a whole bunch of other small prospects. So eventually they all kind of got consolidated under the Ophir Hill, and they put a haulage tunnel in, and they consolidated the older mines. But they worked it all the way into the 70s. And they even drilled it during World War II to see if they could find manganese and zinc and things for the war effort. So there's a lot of really cool documentation on it. But the Buckhorn Mine, which is way up on the hill above Ophir, which is really a town just in a narrow little canyon, The Buckhorn Mine had a tram that came all the way down, a gravity tram. So they could take the ore all the way down the mountain. And gravity tram, the heavy buckets go down and it brings the empty buckets back up. But in that mine, they had mules. And like a lot of mines in the time, 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, up until really the invention of the locomotive and the trammer, electric locomotive, which was pretty early. They had them in the late 1880s, early 1890s. They had electric locomotives for mines, but they didn't become widespread till later. So they used mules. And you and I have seen the mule stables underground in the Buckhorn Mine. And we've seen the piles of dung and the hay,
straw.
or the hay's all rot away, the straw, and saw where they kept the mules. And so it's really neat. I heard this story, and I've looked all over online to see if this story is written. And I don't think it's written anywhere. I think this story is a true generation to generation passed down story. Either that or the guy who told it to me just made it up. But I think it's a generational story because I've looked all over to see. I don't think it's in writing anywhere. I don't think it's on video anywhere. I think this is the first time it's ever been recorded. It's just been an oral story that's been passed down. So in the Buckhorn Mine, there was a mule named Jeff. And the miners loved the mules. It's kind of a universal thing in the West. The mules were treated well. They were very important. They were worth more than the men.
Yep.
So you didn't abuse the mules. You took care of the mules. And so the mules were quite loved. There was a mule named Jeff, and he was brought up to the mountain, and he lived in the mine from a young mule up until he retired. And he worked in the mine every day. And when he retired, they took him down the mountain. And it's quite a hike. It's 3-4 miles and probably 1,500 feet of elevation gain.
It's a steep mountain, yeah.
So they brought him down, and they brought him down outside the canyon. There's nice little green fields and a pasture. And they gave Jeff to a farmer so he could just live out the rest of his days enjoying, fresh grass and being outside after spending his whole life inside laboring. Well, the story goes that Jeff the Mule would break out and he would hike up the mountain at least once a week. He would break out of his pen and he would hike all the way up the mountain and report for work. And the miners would come out of the entrance at the end of the day, and there would be Jeff standing there at the entrance ready to go in and do his day's work.
Yep.
And they eventually had to move him. They moved him to somewhere else in like Tooele County out from Ophir because he just kept coming back to work all the time. And they'd be coming down the mountain at the end of the day or going up, and then they'd pass Jeff on the trail. And they'd break out and go up. So Jeff the Mule. Yep.
Your most loyal employee.
Yep, most loyal. It was one of my favorite stories about Ophir.
Yeah.
But I've spent a lot of time exploring that area. And really those two districts, the Tintics and Ophir, were really what got me interested in mining. And really kind of made us who we are today. I mean, with Mojave Underground, we spent 100 hours underground in Ophir.
Oh, yeah.
We did all the service projects, getting out the trammer, the Mancha trammer, and getting out the incline car, and taking that old ore car out of the Montana shaft, and building the plaques in town, and doing all the other stuff we did there. We spent a lot of time underground in Ophir.
Yeah. I mean, that's really where we learned our love of mining history, and then we doing our part for the landowner to help clean it up and help, restore some of those old equipment that would, not be seen by the general public.
Yeah. The trammer was really cool, and getting some of that stuff out to where people can see it, and getting it out, like particularly the trammer where it was at in the back of the mine. That area is in danger of collapse at any time. I mean, I don't know if it has.
Right. It's been a minute since we've been in there.
And I haven't seen any pictures from that far back in quite some time. So it may have, but it was pretty precarious getting that out. But now that it's out, on the other side of that, they can safely drive it back in the mine and use it in the other parts, and because that back part was really in danger of collapsing. So yeah, neat districts. But yeah, and there's tons of stories about Eureka too.
Oh yeah.
Jesse Knight and how he found he had a vision of where the gold was going to be there. And he ended up, making a big discovery kind of outside where everybody else was when he was watching his cows.
Yep.
And then, yeah, lots of stories. And then we have good stories from our friend Harley about the Mammoth side and the McIntyre family and how they traded their Texas Longhorns for the mineral rights and the claims. And then they ended up staying, and they found that really high grade ore that they had in the ore car.
That's a crazy section too.
Yep.
I mean, I guess it's not a district. What would you deposit, I suppose?
Yeah, the Mammoth. Yeah, I mean, it's all tied together, right?
It's all tied. Yeah. Yeah, I remember exploring that on behalf of a client one year and just seeing the stopes in that mine. It's just unreal.
They're massive.
Massive. I mean, some of the biggest areas I've even seen in my life. They're so big it almost gives you vertigo because you're just looking at this void, and it's so big, and you're just I don't even know.
There's a word for it when you're afraid of super huge spaces.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And I've heard about it because there's a couple of caves in the world where people are known to have it.
Yeah.
And I think it's less common now because we have so much brighter lights.
Yes.
So it used to be I'd go into a stope that was what I would consider now to be relatively small, and it would seem so much bigger because my lights wouldn't reach across.
Right.
But now that everything's 50,000 lumens,
you can see the whole thing.
Makes it smaller. But
yeah.
I remember down in the Mammoth with our brightest lights,
even with our brightest lights, you could barely see the other side, and then you can't see the width of it because it's so big.
Well, and figuring out how to navigate that, how do you get into that? How do you get across?
Yeah, because we were walking down a drift, and then there'd be a little hole in the side of the wall, and almost like a window. And then you'd peek in, you're just oh my goodness, there's a room in here that could fit the airport. Yeah. You're just I don't know what.
Massive stopes.
Massive stuff. I mean, but like you said, maybe you get all the brightest lights and you actually map it out, and then it ends up being the size of your house.
And it'll be interesting to map, and someday it will be mapped. LiDAR has no trouble with stopes like that.
And now we actually have the LiDAR. Maybe we should make an offer.
And it is all tied together with the ore chimney and everything. So
yeah.
That would be very interesting. And we never finished that project. Our rope's still hanging down there.
It is still hanging down there.
600-foot, brand new, high quality 600-foot rope.
Not hauling that bastard out. Oh my goodness.
It's probably still in great shape.
Oof. That was a trip.
Yep.
Sometimes mine exploring is really hard.
If you're doing it right, it's always hard.
Yeah.
If you're just casually wandering into things, it's easy. But if you're getting to places where other people haven't been,
it's going to be difficult.
It's going to be difficult.
It's not going to be a walk in the park.
And especially if you're getting to places that nobody's been since they shut down.
Yeah.
And all the ladders are gone, and all the cribbing's gone, and
it's just the unknown, right? Because the ladders were still there, but nobody knew the conditions of them. And it's we're not going to take that risk just to run down the ladders, because you could get halfway down and be like, oh crap, 3 rungs are missing. Now what?
If it was easy, nobody would hire us to do it.
Yeah.
Get hired to do the hard stuff.
That's right. That's why we solve the challenges of mining, either through mine exploration or reports.
Clam staking reports, new exploration methods. We're doing some really cool prospecting right now.
Yeah.
On a broad scale, narrowing down targets based on a whole bunch of different criteria. So,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I've been working with our consulting team.
Yeah, we've certainly expanded our services over the last 15 years.
Yeah. Poof, 15. It feels like 50.
Feels like 5.
You must be having more fun than me.
I am having a good time. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's fun.
Good.
Yeah, we have a good team.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's cool to see the projects that they're working on and they're learning how to solve their own challenges of mining.
Yeah, and new things. We don't shy away from a project just because something hasn't been done before.
Right.
Or it's been done really inefficiently and we think we have a new way to do it better. We'll we'll give it a try.
Give it a go. That's how we learn.
Yeah, and there's trial and error, and we lose money on projects all the time doing that. But once we figure it out and we can do it, and we can do it better and faster, then it really starts to pay off because we can do a bunch of them, and it makes sense. But
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's good for this episode. We've run the gamut.
Yes.
More Fast 41, mining history.
Abandoned mine exploration.
Yeah, some recaps of past episodes, some future stuff. We talked about a mule named Jeff. Yeah, abandoned mine exploring. We went down in the Mammoth to the 900-foot level.
I think so.
900 feet on narrow ladders. And we were on rope too for safety, but
it was
the rope actually made it difficult because it was in the way of being able to climb.
Well, they're 10-foot sections and they're offset, so if there was any issues, like you land on a platform.
Yeah, so there's 10 feet, then you turn around and go 10 feet, turn around, 10 feet, turn around. And the platforms are literally this big. Like we're talking about.
So I'm a small person. I'm little. And it was tight for me going down.
I was a smaller person.
You still had the height, though.
And I still had the height. But I had a backpack on and a camera, and I had a really hard time, like, kind of trying to get it all down.
Yeah, I had a pack, too. Man, it was a night.
So if we go back down there and finish that job, I need 90 days so I can lose 20 pounds.
No. We'll go down so we went down the manway. We'll just go down the shaft because it was clear the whole way.
Rappel down the shaft.
Yeah, that's so much easier.
So much easier. I'd rather rappel down the shaft.
And then climb up the ladders.
And then climb up the ladders, but put all your gear in the shaft.
And then haul
hoist
it
all
up.
that up, put it on some pulleys, hoist it 900 feet up the shaft, and then just climb up the ladder on rope still for safety.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, and then the down is fun. 900-foot rappel.
Yeah, you just got to go slow so you don't burn your rope.
Yeah, or get a rack.
Yeah.
Just get a big rack for something like that. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Because the little rappelling devices we use, the Petzl Slow.
Petzl Slow, yeah.
The Petzl Slow.
If you wear them out long.
They
overheat.
Well, it depends on your rope too.
They overheat
so quick. Yeah, they're really only good for
a few
300 feet. I've done 600 feet on it, but
you stop.
I stopped.
Let it cool. But you can't, because sometimes it will glaze your rope. You got to be really careful.
Well, if you do like 100 feet at a time and stop, but if you do like 400 feet fast and then just sit,
you're gonna get in trouble.
Then you're glazing your rope the whole time.
No.
Which doesn't technically like weaken the rope, but it definitely messes with the grip and the way it flexes and stuff. So.
Yeah, you don't want to get in a habit of that. Yeah. Rappelling. Yeah, that was fun. Hard. Scary.
Rappelling in mines. Yeah.
Especially when rocks are coming down.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll share some stories
got
about.
Got hit by a lot of rocks.
I got hit by a rake. Yeah.
Yep. We have a lot of stories, and we'll share more stories because they're exciting and make things interesting. So it's not just technical mining stuff. I think the mining history and the stories of things we've explored are fun. And they've never been told before, so we're at least getting them down somewhere.
Getting them documented.
Some of them have been sort of told, but none of them really filmed. So
yeah. We'll go down that rabbit hole one day.
To going down rabbit holes and into mine shafts, but do it safely.
And watch out for snakes.
Yeah. But not really. It's like the least of your concerns. If you're going in an abandoned mine, watch your footing because falling down holes is your biggest danger. Look for things above because getting hit by rocks is your next biggest danger.
Protect your noggin.
But the most important thing, just go with somebody who knows what they're doing. Or don't go.
Yeah.
Stay out unless you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, find somebody who does that'll teach you, and then make sure you have all the right equipment and know where you're going. And
be safe, be responsible. It's not that hard.
Right.
Choose safety always.
Which just means don't go in abandoned mines, really.
Stay out, stay alive.
Yep.
All right, until next time.
Okay, see you next time.